Happened there. So each week when we get this PowerPoint presentation, it's called Song Show Presentation ready. Uh, Shelley always leaves space for the video that I'm going to use this week, and she does that by leaving the video from the previous week. And when I left on Thursday, I was planning on having a video for you, which is not going to happen because I didn't get in here and I didn't change it. For today, I was planning on doing The Lion King. I had my sermon by Thursday. I had it all in my head mapped out where it was going to go, and we were going to do a little video on The Lion King. We were going to talk about that. I'm sorry, girls. I know you would love to see The Lion King, wouldn't you? I would love to see it too, but it's another time because something happened throughout the course of the weekend that just changed my direction for everything. And actually, not just this weekend, but it's really been happening for about the last week and a half. There's been a conversation going on up here, and I just needed to get it out and share it with you. So no video today. Instead, let me tell you about yesterday. I did a wedding in Iowa City, and I'm not going to tell you about the wedding, but I'm going to tell you about the church where the wedding was located. It is in Iowa City area. It's in a town called Tiffin. Tiffin, I'm guessing at one time, was a farming community a few miles outside of Iowa City. But now, because of the boom that's happening there, it's becoming part of suburban Iowa City. And this is a growing area. And so Jill got her phone out and put the address into Google Maps, and we started following where Google Maps was telling us to go. Because obviously you can't go any place without Google Maps, right? And so we're following this, and it's taking us on all these side roads and up this hill where there is all this new construction going on, all these new homes. In fact, there were more homes that were unfinished in this area than there were homes that had grass on them and families living in them. Way more, like twice as many. And Google Maps took us all the way to the end of this street, which was going up a hill. And at the end of the street, it becomes this dirt path with a fence across it. And Google Maps says, now get out and walk. I kid you not. Google Maps told us to get out and walk. Well, we couldn't see. It just looked like it was going out into nowhere. So we decided, let's turn the car around and go back. We went back to the first cross section. We looked, because it was kind of over that way, so we looked off to the side, and we looked up this street that went about a block into nowhere. So we took the street. We got to the end of it, and if we'd have kept going, it would have been nowhere. But instead, we could take another left and take another street to nowhere, and another street, and now we're getting out past where there's any construction at all, out to nowhere, and it curves around up to this building that looks like a manufacturing plant. And we had no other streets to go on. Had we had more streets to go on, we probably would have gone by it because it did not look like a church. And that was it. So we walk in, and it's got this industrial look to it. And, I mean, if you were to walk in, you'd say it's not finished, but that part of the church is finished. It's just the way it looks. On the left-hand side, there are a couple of computer stations that are the kids' registrations. And so what you do, you check your kid in, and you get a ticket, and you leave your kid with them, and you have to present the ticket to redeem your kid at the end of the church service. That's how it works. That's how it works in a lot of churches these days. On the right was this office area that was tucked way back in the corner. And if you go through that door and into the office, it's this big open room with a few desks, a lot of supplies, office supplies, just sitting out all around, and a bunch of networking equipment with all the wires exposed. And then in the middle are all these doors, and above each door it says auditorium. We go in. And it's an auditorium. It's got a stage. It's got movable seating all over the place, and a great big sound desk, which I would die for back here. Great big sound desk with lots and lots of room. And there is this guy. His name is Peter. And he is our sound engineer. He's our lighting guy. And he's the wedding coordinator. Peter, the wedding coordinator. And so there's a little time before the wedding, so Peter and I get to talking, and I just asked him, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. He said, well, I went to school at the University of Iowa, and I got involved with the salt company. Do any of you know what the salt company is? Not surprising. If you're a U of I student or an Iowa State student, you know exactly what it is. This is a campus ministry that literally serves and attracts thousands of students every year at the University of Iowa and Iowa State University, and as I found out later in the conversation, literally all over the country. It is turning campuses upside down. When I went to college, we had little student groups that were student ministry groups. This is nuts. It's just crazy what's happening. And so he started in Salt Company. He said, I love Salt Company. He said, I really wasn't a church member before, but I got involved in that. And then they decided to start this church off of the Salt Company, the church that we were in. And he is now given the first part of his professional life to working in this church as a sound engineer, a lighting engineer, and on occasion, a wedding coordinator. Isn't that interesting? 20-something guy. So we got talking a little bit more. And I said, so how many people come to church here? He said, well, an average week, we have about 800 people. Think about this. 800 people who wind their way, and some of them for the first time, through this maze of broken roads to go out and worship. Hold that thought. Let's sing. Okay, so I have another confession to make. Because I really started rewriting this sermon in earnest yesterday, I'm not quite sure where it's going. And I think that's because I'm still processing that conversation and a couple of other things that have happened this last couple of weeks, which I'll share with you later in the sermon. But for right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to the lesson that Tom read. It's a very interesting lesson and something that it's always been there, and I've always seen it, but I never really quite read it the way I did this week, and especially yesterday. So Jesus, a little background, Acts chapter 1, Jesus has been risen from the dead, and he's been on earth for 40 days. And he is about to leave the disciples for the last time and ascend into heaven. And the disciples, for their parting question to Jesus, asked this: will you now restore the kingdom to Israel? Well, the way I've always read that is, will the kingdom of heaven come now? That's the way I've always read that. Like heaven itself coming down to earth. That's the way I've read it. But that's not what the disciples are asking. And it didn't really hit me in the eyes until this weekend. Because, you see, what they're really asking about is they're asking about their very real world, the situation in which they are living at that time and that place in history. And I will tell you that it is a toilet. For the previous 7 decades, Rome has occupied their home. And they are brutal, and they are ruthless, and they tax people to the point, people that don't have money at all, they tax people to the point where they have nothing left. And you know, it's so oppressive that everyone is just running for cover. Remember the story of Jesus' birth? That story centers around a taxation. They're going to all get counted so that they can be taxed. Well, about that same time, there is this guy by the name of Judas. He's from Galilee. He leads a rebellion against the taxes. He says, it is only loyal and right to your country as Israel to not pay these taxes. And he so believes this that people that do pay their taxes, he burns their homes. It's almost like terrorist activity. Well, in response, Judas, the Galilean, and 2,000 others are tried and executed by Rome, by crucifixion. 2,000 crucifixions. They're lined up along the roadsides between each of the towns. It looks like telephone posts as you go down the road. And what's more is, they don't take them down. They don't want to take them down. They leave them up there to rot. So that when you pass by, and by the way, that little ride from Galilee to Bethlehem that Mary and Joseph took, more than likely included some of those sites. You get the sense of what's going on? It's so oppressive. You see that body rotting up there, hanging on the cross, and the message is clear. You get out of line, that's going to happen to you. And so everyone in Palestine, they're all scared. Some of them are accommodating the Romans. They don't like it, but they put up with them because they've got some money and they want to keep their money. They want to keep their position, so they play ball with the Romans. Others are just sure that the end of the world is here and God is going to rain fire and brimstone down on the whole business and start over. Still others, like Judas the Galilean, are going to fight for their country. And they're going to die for their country. And hopefully they will make life so miserable for Rome that eventually Rome will leave. And the mass majority of them just want to keep their heads down. They just want to stay out of sight so that they don't get caught in the bloodbath. But every one of them, from top to bottom, they resent Rome. They hate what's going on. And most of all, they are waiting for a king to come. The Hebrew word for king, anybody know? Messiah. The Greek word for king, anybody know? Christ. It's not Jesus' last name, it's a title. Jesus the King. And they're waiting for a political and military leader to spearhead a rebellion and relieve themselves of this oppression. Now let's go back. Jesus was about to leave this earth. And the disciples, with their parting question, will you now, at this time, restore the kingdom to Israel? See what's going on? At the same time, I have to wonder where they've been for the last 3 years. They've been at his side, and they know this is not what he's about. He's not a man of hatred, and he's not a man of violence. He is a man of compassion. He is a man who gathers around him not the popular or the wealthy or the influential. He gathers around him the outcasts and the misfits. And when it comes to his enemies, he loves them. And he prays for those who would do him harm. I know what the disciples are saying, and I know what they're thinking, but Jesus, they've been with him for 3 years, and they have to know that he doesn't fit the mold. What they want is they want Jesus to raise himself up, to elevate him into some kind of leader and become something great so that the world will see his power and his influence. But what Jesus is he's more like the sea. He is the lowest place on earth. So that all by his self-service and by his self-giving, all the world are like streams that flow down to him. It's the gravity of love. And it is so powerful. So much so that all the weapons and all the armies And all the great leaders of the world are impotent against that kind of power. Everyone is drawn to him through love. Now, at this point to the disciples, they're still not getting it. They've been with him for 3 years, but he's still an enigma to them. But they will soon. I want you to notice what Jesus says to them. They say, will you now restore the kingdom to Israel? He says, I'm not going to answer your question. It's not for you to know. He said, instead, you're going to tell others about me. But for right now, I want you to wait for it. Because this love that I have for you and this self-giving that brought you to me will become something called the Holy Spirit. And when you receive it, it's going to change everything. Now think about this. One chapter later, Acts chapter 2. It was 11. They choose the 12th because Judas Iscariot has killed himself, right? So there's 12 of them. There's a handful of misfits and outcasts. Between them, there is not a single priest or church leader of any kind. Most of them didn't go to church because they just didn't. And the Holy Spirit comes. That love, that self-giving. And they begin to tell others about the man who made himself low. And they begin to care for the outcasts and the misfits like Jesus cared for them. 12 people. No power, no influence, no weapons, no armies, no crowns. A handful of others. And they change the world. Literally change the world. Is the Roman Empire still here? Been gone for 1,000 years. Other empires have come and gone. But this movement, this man who makes himself low, continues on. Not just to survive, but to continue to draw all streams to him. Let's sing. Okay, that was a long history lesson, but it's important. I wanted you to know that so you understand what's happening right now. Because the church as you and I know it is dying. Did you know that? In the last 20 years, the ELCA, our church body, has lost between 70 and 100,000 members a year, with the exception of 2 years, where between those 2 years, they lost 500,000 members. Okay? It's not just Lutherans. Atlantic Magazine last month reported that last year alone, 10,000 churches in the United States closed their doors. Wow. We are led by experienced religious professionals who find more ways to miss the mark than I can possibly count. Present company included. Now, I don't mean to sound pessimistic because I am not. I see signs of hope and life like you can't imagine. It takes you down a road that ends in dirt and out and around to an industrial-looking building where 800 people each week gather to worship. And a 20-something who, truth be known, probably wouldn't fit in a place like this very well, has given his life for Jesus. I see signs of life and hope. At Iowa and Iowa State, campuses all around the country. The places are lighting up. Lives are being changed. They go to learn a skill or a craft or become a professional. They come out with something that's way more important, a relationship with Jesus Christ. There are signs of life and hope. I see it in the office next to mine. This is what got all this started. Where 3 teenagers of our congregation who do not have my 60 years of church experience and 4 years of seminary education are giggling and laughing and planning little things that I could never dream of. I told you that they are my bosses, and they are. Because they are going to lead this congregation to a place where we will be at the point of changing lives that need hope. Entering into the hearts of people who just don't experience love. And let me tell you, contrary to what you might be thinking, this is not about age. It's about 2 things. It's about, first of all, this man who, like the sea, makes himself low. So low, so beneath us, that because of that love, we are all drawn to him, each in our own way. And it's about a bunch of disciples, you and me, and those 12 who at the moment in this lesson find Jesus to be a bit of an enigma. And he says, don't worry about what's going on right now. We're not building a kingdom here. It's not about the next new church program. It's about witnessing to me who served you. And in terms of where that takes you, Jesus says, like he said to those disciples, wait for it. The Spirit will come into your hearts. And it will change you. And it will help you to see the mission in a new way. And you will look into the hearts of those who, as far as this building goes, are misfits and outcasts. And my goodness, we will make them our friends. And we will care for them. And we will love them. And we will see to it that they know the man who changed our lives so that he might have an opportunity to change their life as well.